Israel, for goodness and for blessing, materially and spiritually. We should all be there before your planned flight. Should be there with Mashiach today. Why wait till tomorrow? So, this week we read about the building of the Mishkan, the building of the tabernacle. The Torah says that after the tabernacle was completed, so the Torah says that the Jewish people did all that they needed to do. They finished it, and then Vayivarech Moshe Rabbeinu blessed them. What was the blessing? Rashi says Moshe told them, "May it be Hashem's will that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, rests in the work of your hands." That's what he said. And then he added, Rashi adds the words, "May the pleasantness of Hashem our God be upon us," etc. That's the words of Rashi. Rashi continues, that verse is in chapter 90 in Psalms. That verse is one of the 11 Psalms that Moses said. There are some Psalms that were written in Tehillim that were authored by Moshe Rabbeinu, authored by Moses, and this is one of those Psalms. So, a couple of questions to look at this Rashi. First of all, what is the reason Rashi needs to explain anything? Why to talk about it? It seems like a very simple thing. They did their job. They built the tabernacle. So Moses blessed them. It's like he gave them Yosher Koyach. He gave them a thank you. So why does Rashi have to say anything? Also, Rashi says the words, he said to them. We know that he blessed them. The verse says he blessed them. Why does it say he said to them? Third question is, says in the Torah, Rashi says, another thing, he brings the verse, may the pleasantness of Hashem be upon us. Why does Rashi consider that verse to be the verse that he said? How is Rashi is not the Medrash. The Medrash says this. The Medrash gives a homiletical interpretation. It derives things that are not in the simple meaning of the words. But here, Rashi is the one saying this. So the question is, how does Rashi know that is the words, those words in that verse, Moshe Rabbeinu blessed them with specifically those words? The underlying question also is that if Moshe Rabbeinu blessed them, a blessing is different than a prayer. A blessing is said in the language of a commandment. But Rashi changes, although the Torah says that he blessed them, the Torah changes and says Moshe Rabbeinu prayed that may Hashem's presence rest in the work of your hands. How come Rashi is changing it? This question goes even greater because later on in Parshat Shmini, Rashi brings the same kind of thing after he and Aaron bring sacrifices to Hashem on the first day of Nisan. They again, Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron conclude their sacrifices, and then it says over there in the Torah that Rashi says the same thing, but he switches the order around. He says, what did they say? They said, "May the pleasantness of Hashem be upon us." And then the second part he doesn't add the word etc. He skips the etc. Why etc.? Every word in Rashi is exact. Here he doesn't say it etc. But in our Torah portion does say etc. What's the difference? And over there he switches around. First he says they said may the pleasantness of Hashem be upon us, and then they said may the Shekhinah, may the divine presence rest in the work of your hands. How come he's switching the order around? What's going on over here? The answer is like this. Moshe Rabbeinu is giving a blessing. Who is a blessing to? Is a blessing to all the Jewish people? Or is a blessing only to those who were involved in creating and working on the tabernacle? The Torah says that there were chachmei lev, there were those with wise hearts, that Moshe Rabbeinu commanded that they should participate in building the tabernacle. So is the blessing of Moshe Rabbeinu for all the Jewish people, or just for the ones who worked on it? So it makes sense to say that the blessing should go for everybody. Why should it go for everybody? Because everybody gave, men and women. The women came before the men to give, and women were more generous than the men. So it makes sense to say that the ones who got the blessing were everybody. But if that's who the blessing was given to, then why does why does Moshe wait to bless them until the tabernacle is completed? If he's blessing them because of the donations that they gave, bless them as soon as the donations were given. Why is he waiting until the Chachmei Lev, until all those wise-hearted finish building the tabernacle, if the blessing is about their contribution? So you have to say that when they gave their donations to the tabernacle, one of two things happened. Either Moshe blessed them, and Torah doesn't have to say because it's obvious that he blessed them. He obviously gave them Yashar Koach, obviously gave them a thanks. Or the Moshe didn't have to bless them, he didn't have to thank them, because it's understood that he would appreciate it. Moshe Rabbeinu certainly had a nachas ruach, certainly he enjoyed, certainly he appreciated, he had nachas from the fact that Jewish people built the tabernacle. But he didn't actually have to give them a blessing because it was self-understood that he appreciated it. So either he gave the blessing, the Torah doesn't have to mention it because it's self-understood he gave them, because it's obvious he did it, or he didn't actually have to mouth the blessing. It was in his thoughts, it was certainly clear to the Jewish people that Moshe would have appreciated this and Moshe would have blessed them. That's why he didn't bless them when the Torah doesn't record a blessing for when they gave the donations. However, here something else. Here we're talking about all the Jewish people. Here we're talking about the Chachmei Lev, those wise-hearted who built the tabernacle. Among the ones who built the tabernacle was Moshe himself. As Rashi says, that when they built the tabernacle, they were unable to keep it erected. They were unable to erect it, and Hashem told Moshe, you put your hand there, and then the tabernacle will be erected. Moshe had to put his hand out to build the tabernacle. No human being could make this work, and Moshe participated. He put his hand out to make the tabernacle become erected. And so Moshe Rabbeinu is not only blessing the Jewish people, but he must also be part of this story, because only with his effort is the tabernacle built. Everyone does everything they're doing, but it will not become erected. It doesn't last. Only with Moshe's putting his hand there does the tabernacle finally have the blessing that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, is there, and it lasts, and it's erected, and it stays that way. The Torah used the expression, Hashem tells Moshe, you should be involved with your hand. Vinira, no one could, Rashi says no human being could lift the boards, they're too heavy. But Moshe was able to lift these boards, and Hashem told Moshe, be involved with it. In other words, don't strain yourself, just put your hand out. Vinira, and it will appear as if you're picking it up. And then he puts his hand out, and boom, the tabernacle is erected. That's what the Torah says it was put up. It doesn't say it was put up by itself. He just put his hand out and it was erected. No human being could do it, and Moshe Rabbeinu's effort made it happen. Okay, so Moshe is one of the people involved in building the tabernacle. So if he's giving a blessing to everyone who's part of the building the tabernacle, he must be included too. So what was his blessing? When they built the tabernacle, again, there's no need to give a specific blessing, just a thanks. Yashar Koach, it's appreciated, good job. But here, they did something. They had a goal. What was the goal of building the tabernacle? Why do they want to build the tabernacle? The whole goal of it was, the whole purpose of this whole tabernacle thing was there in order that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, should rest there. Therefore Moshe Rabbeinu gave a blessing. The blessing was, he Amar Lahem. He said to those involved in building it, he said, guys, you worked, you tried, you did. May this have the impact that you want it to have. May Hashem's presence rest in the work of your hands. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu said after they brought him all of the items, all of the building of the tabernacle. He said, may this work. But not only did he say make this work, the work of your hands, he had to include himself too, because he also was part of it. And that's why Rashi said, Rashi adds the words that Moshe also quoted the verse, may the pleasantness of Hashem be upon us. What's the addition of Rashi, may the pleasantness of Hashem be upon us? He said upon us in the plural. Why upon us in the plural? Not just upon you, not just in the second, what's it? Upon you or upon us? What's it called? Second person and
second and third person.
Second and third person, thank you. He didn't just say in the second person, may the presence of Hashem be upon you. He said upon us, because he was also part of building the tabernacle. And Rashi adds the words, etc. Why he add the word, etc.? Because what's next part of the verse? May Hashem establish the work of our hands. Moshe Rabbeinu is really not the one who is involved, straining himself to build a tabernacle. The wise-hearted people were working for days and nights building the tabernacle. Moshe Rabbeinu's action was just to put his hand out. He was misasik. It just looked like he was involved. And therefore, the correct, the emphasis is only that of his prayers that Hashem should rest upon us and what we've done. But when he gets to the words, the work of our hands, the work of our hands is mainly the Jewish people. So Moshe Rabbeinu, Rashi says, the word etc. The word etc. is meant to add explanation to what Rashi has said already. Rashi is saying, the Jewish people put up the tabernacle, and Moshe Rabbeinu is giving them a blessing. What's a blessing? That it should work. And therefore he says, the first thing he says, may Hashem rest upon your hand. You guys did this. You Chachmei Lev, you wise-hearted people, you did this. But it wasn't just the Chachmei Lev, all the Jewish people get credit also, and all of them are trying to do this. And so Moshe Rabbeinu includes himself as well, because he himself also participated and put his hand there. Hashem wanted him to be part of it. That's in this 2 week's Torah portion. And that's where Rashi adds the words, this chapter 90 of Psalms is one of the 11 chapters that Moshe Rabbeinu said. Why does Rashi have to add that? Chapter 90, it says explicitly in the Psalm, this is a prayer of Moses. So why does Rashi have to say this was said by Moses as if this is one of the 11 Psalms? The reason Rashi has to add that is because you might think Moshe just said the beginning of the verse. But the end of the verse, which talks about how man lives till 70 years old or to 80 years old, and at the end of the verse, Moshe was already 80 years old when he took the Jewish people out of Egypt, so he was already over 80. So maybe the end of the verse, you might think, was said by the Jewish people. They said, may the pleasantness of Hashem be upon us. Maybe they said, may Hashem establish the work of our hands. Maybe they were the ones who made that prayer. Therefore, Rashi says, it's not just this verse that was said by Moses. He said the next 10 verses afterwards. So since he said a continuation of 11 verses, 11 chapters, rather, so it makes sense to say that he said this verse as well, the last verse of the Psalm, and that's the prayer he said, may the pleasantness of Hashem be upon us, including himself, because he also participated. And not just the people who were straining themselves, working hard, but he also was part of it. However, in Parshat Shemini, later on, the Torah is talking not about the efforts of the Jewish people. Parshat Shemini is talking about the sacrifices of Moses and Aaron, talking about their sacrifices that they brought. So who are the main people over there? Who are the main characters that the verses are talking about? It's talking about Moses and Aaron. That's why Rashi begins over there, and the first prayer they say is, may the pleasantness of Hashem be upon us, because he's talking about himself and Aaron. He doesn't mention the word etc., because the end of that verse is about all the Jewish people doing something. He's talking about him and himself, and Aaron bringing the sacrifices. Therefore, doesn't mention the word etc. And then he adds, well, this isn't really only about me. Everyone else also built the tabernacle. And so therefore he concludes the verse. Rashi concludes with, and he added a prayer, may the Shekhinah rest in the work of your hands. He begins with his own efforts because that's the subject of the verse. Moses and Aaron bring the sacrifices. Rashi first there mentions the words, may the pleasantness of Hashem be upon us, and only afterwards does he say, may the Shekhinah rest upon you. So there's 3 changes. Number 1, he doesn't mention the word etc., because there the end of the verse is about not Moses and Aaron, it's about others. And number 2, he mentions the prayer, may the Shekhinah rest and work of your hands, second, because he's not talking about the Jewish people's efforts. He's talking about his efforts. But since his efforts helped to complete what everyone else did, therefore he does add the words, may the Shekhinah rest in the work of your hands, because after all, his efforts concluded the work of all the Jewish people. But the emphasis is on what he is doing, and therefore the Rashi switches around the order in that verse, and he says, first the prayer was, the pleasantness of Hashem should be upon us, upon Moses and Aaron who brought the sacrifices. And then he says, may the Shekhinah rest upon the work of your hands. And that's why also in that verse doesn't say, Omar lahem, he said to them. Over here, Rashi says the words he said to them, because here Rashi is saying that Moses is responding to those people who made the effort to build the tabernacle. So they made an effort to build a tabernacle. So Rashi says, so Moshe blessed those who built the tabernacle. May your work have a conclusion. May there be an impact of what you tried to do. He's addressing them. Here, Moshe and Aaron are beginning the conversation. They're not responding to someone. They have brought the sacrifices, and they are giving the blessing that pleasantness of Hashem, that the Shekhinah should rest in what they have done. And they are only adding at the end of the verse that the Shekhinah should rest in the work of the Jewish people's hands as a result of what they've done. And therefore the Rashi, there first, what's the verse? May the pleasantness of Hashem be upon us. And then he says the words, may the Shekhinah rest in the work of your hands. And that's why over there Rashi doesn't mention how this psalm was said by Moses. It's one of the 11 psalms. That's not the point of Rashi already said it here first of all, but besides that, there in that verse, the subject of the verse is Moses and Aaron. It's talking about their sacrifices that caused the divine presence to rest upon the Jewish people. And so the end of the verse isn't relevant, and the verse talks about what the Jewish people have done, and Moshe is just saying with Aaron that may Hashem rest upon us what we have done to our efforts. And this verse, in our Torah portion, is talking about the blessing he gave to the Chachmei Lev, to the wise-hearted, and how their efforts to build a tabernacle should reach its conclusion. That's the explanation of the Rashi. We have an amazing lesson that we learned from this Rashi. What do we learn from this Rashi? I know we changed the clock, and we had to learn these Talmudic intricacies in this Rashi, and it's not the funnest thing to do at so early in the morning. They change the clock, and you're tired, but L'chaim. Lesson is like this. Lesson making things a little easier now. Getting to a lesson. Lesson in our lives is like this. The Jewish people do lots of great stuff. They build a tabernacle. They get together. They make the donations. They're almost there. But for it to actually happen, they need Moses. They need Moses to participate, and they need Moses to bless them. It doesn't work without Moses' blessing and Moses' participation. In a similar way, the Talmud says that anyone, the Mechilta says on the verse, and they believed in Hashem and in Moshe his servant, says the Mechilta, anyone who believes in Moses and the faithful shepherd of Hashem, it's as if he believes in Hashem. The Chassam Sefer wrote a Sefer when Chassam Sefer himself was a student of Pinchas the Baal HaFloah, who was a student of the Mizitcha Maggid. And therefore there are a lot of things in his Sefer, in his book, which are based on chassidus, even though he isn't known for chassidus, but because he learned from someone who was a student of Mizitcha Maggid, he has a lot of chassidus in there. One of the things he says is that he addresses the idea of asking for a blessing from a tzaddik, because why is that allowed? You're not allowed to worship idols. You're not allowed to put intermediaries between you and Hashem. So what's the idea of asking for a blessing from a tzaddik? So he says like this. A tzaddik is called memutza mechaber. He's an intermediary who binds you with Hashem. It says in the Torah, Moshe Levin said, when he gave us the Torah, I stood between you and Hashem to tell you the word of Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu is an intermediary to give us the words of Hashem, but there are different ways of being an intermediary. Moshe Rabbeinu, his function as an intermediary is one in the language of the Chassam Sefer that binds us with Hashem, makes us one with Hashem. He is transparent to the godly energy that he transmits to us. The Shekhinah speaks from the throat of Moshe Rabbeinu. So, in order for the Shekhinah to rest among the Jewish people, it's through Moshe Rabbeinu that this gift is given to the Jewish people. It's through his participation, and it's through his blessing. This is in sync with the words of the Talmud. The Talmud says that there's someone sick in your house, chas v'shalom, someone sick at home, what should you do? The Talmud says, go to a wise man in your city and ask them to pray for you. That's the language of the Talmud in Bava Basra. Someone sick in your house, chas v'shalom, go to the wise man in your city and ask him to beseech Hashem for you. What is the meaning of that sentence? Who is the Talmud referring to? The Talmud says the wise man. So where else do we have that word, the wise man? We have it in Pirkei Avos. Who is a wise man that says the Pirkei Avos? One who sees the outcome. Someone who could see at the beginning of a situation where this will lead. It says in Tanya, who is someone who could see Hanoila, things that will happen, this is a tzaddik. Because it's not just referring to the outcome of things. Everyone, not everyone, but a wise man, a regular wise man could see the expected outcome of a certain situation. A regular person may know there's an outcome, but doesn't see it. Like last night, I know they're going to change the clocks, but until they change it, I'm okay to go to sleep an hour later. And then in the morning, if I was a wise active restaurant, I know I got to check my numbers in the morning, go to sleep earlier, for sure. Anyways, but a wise man sees the outcome. But in Tanya, the author says something else. He says, who is really a wise man? A wise man is someone who sees the birth. The words of the Talmud are very specific. It doesn't use the word outcome. It uses the word noila. Noila means the birth. Who is a wise man? Someone who sees that the world is being born every second from Hashem's energy. He sees how Hashem is recreating the world every second. He doesn't see the physical world only, or he doesn't see the physical facade of the world. He sees the Devar Hashem, sees the word of Hashem that animates and vivifies and creates every single thing in the world out of nothingness every moment. That's what the tzaddik sees. And therefore, when just the Gemara says, Rabbi Moshe daughter once lit the Shabbos candles with vinegar instead of oil, and she was very upset. So what did Rabbi Moshe do? He said to his daughter, the one who told the oil to burn will tell the vinegar to burn. The oil has its components, and its properties, and its characteristics because of the divine energy in the oil. Vinegar has its properties and characteristics because of the divine energy in the vinegar. What is the source of the different characteristics of each? It's the words of Hashem. There's the words of Hashem in the oil, and the words of Hashem in the vinegar. So Rabbi Moshe, because he was a tzaddik who could see the outcome, could see the words of Hashem that animate everything, he was able to cause a change in the divine DNA, if you will, of the oil and the vinegar, and them to change. That's what the Chacham can do. The Chacham who sees the word of Hashem is able to affect a change in the words of Hashem and move the letters around. As we see that the tzaddik sometimes tells a person to add a name to his name to bring about a different kind of divine energy in that person. He knows what name to add, etc. So number one, the Chacham sees the divine energy, and therefore he could cause the change. But number two, he's a Chacham in your city. So someone doesn't just say go to a wise man. It says go to a wise man in your city, someone who cares about you. It's not enough just to have someone who has this gift of seeing the divine energy in creation. It has to be someone who cares, who will respond to you and daven for you. And therefore the Talmud says, goes to the wise man in your city. The physical blessings of a Jew and the spiritual blessings of a Jew are all affected by the tzaddik of the generation, the Moshe in the generation. Just like by the tabernacle. There were two things. Moshe prayed for the Jewish people, Moshe participated in the Jewish people. So too that the Gemara says, you go to the wise man, and the wise man in your city, and he prays for you. Number one, he sees what's going on. He sees the divine energy in creation. Number two, he prays for you, he blesses you, and causes there to be healing, chassidus, whether a person has a physical element or a spiritual element, everything's missing. The word chayla, ill, is the medical equivalent to 49. Gemara says if you have 49 gates of understanding, you're missing the 50th, you're not all the way there, it's still called sick spiritually, you're not there all the way. Whatever's going on in a Jew's life, whether it's a physical element, whether it's a spiritual element, it's emotion, every generation, that makes it happen. Like in this week's Torah portion, they did everything. They gave to the nation, they put it in the tabernacle, they're all ready. And yet, for it to actually work, you need to have Moshe Levin. So the Torah here is highlighting the connection of every Jew with Moshe Rabbeinu and how we can't do this on our own, and we need to have Moshe Rabbeinu to make it happen.
There was a guy you mentioned who talks about intermediaries who study with a chassid. He was talking about
Chassam Sefer.
Chassam Sefer. He was talking about different kinds of intermediaries.
Yeah.
Moshe Rabbeinu binds Jewish people to Hashem.
Yeah.
How is that different from other intermediaries?
Other
intermediaries.
So Moshe Rabbeinu's whole existence is godly. He has no identity of self. How do we describe Moshe in the Torah? He's a servant of Hashem. He doesn't have his own identity. He is just a servant of Hashem. He is transparent to the divine energy in his throne. Moshe Rabbeinu says in the Shema, I will give you grass. How is he giving any grass? I will give you grass to your animals. Hashem is speaking through his throat. So as opposed to, let's say, a father and mother, the Torah says to honor your father and mother. Why should you honor your father and mother? They aren't you supposed to honor Hashem? He is the one who caused you to be born. However, your father and mother, they have free choice whether or not to give birth to you, to be part of the blessing of Hashem. And therefore, the Torah says you should give them honor. That's a unique mitzvah because they have free will, as opposed to the sun and the moon, lahavdil, which have no free choice, and they're just tools like an axe in the hand of a wood chopper that have no power at all. They are distinct. They are not godly beings. There's a sun and there's a moon. You don't see the godly energy in them, and some parents, some children will see in their parents godliness. Depends on the child. Depends on the parent. But the idea of a mutza mechaber means that there's no space in the channel of the divine energy that is not godly, that is not holy. In Moshe Rabbeinu, his whole existence is godliness. His whole existence is Hashem. His whole existence on his own. His whole being is about being a servant of Hashem. There's an expression that people use about certain tzaddikim. Their whole existence is torah. And that just means that their whole thought process is torah. Their feelings are torah. This is something more. The existence of Moshe Rabbeinu is godliness. He is so abnegated for he's a chariot for the divine will. There's no sense of self there at all. He's just a chariot for the divine will. There's no sense of anything else other than godliness. I mean, it's hard for us to talk about it and to imagine it because we feel ourselves and we exist and we have ego. But that's what a tzaddik is. And therefore, tzaddik is called an intermediary that connects because there's nothing in him that's other than that's not transparent to the divine energy that's been channeled through him.
So, when we talk about giving honor